So, good afternoon, everyone. Good morning or good evening, depending on which part of the world you are. Welcome you all to the last day of our Policy Symposium. Today, we're going to have two sessions, one dedicated to youth and another one dedicated later on to the civil society organizations. And because we have a great panel today with a lot of speakers, I think we should start right away. And I would like to introduce you to the moderator of today. So today we have as moderator Dr. Antonino Salmeri. He's a space lawyer specialized in the governance of space resource and lunar activities, and the director of the Lunar Policy Platform and co-chair of the Space Generation Advisory Council. So thank you very much, Antonino, and of course, thank you very much to all of the panelists that we have here today. And without further ado, Antonino, I'll give you the floor right away. Thank you very much for joining as moderator.
Hi, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Thank you so much, Hugo. Thanks all of you for joining us today for this wonderful session. I would like to begin by thanking the government of Portugal and UNOOSA for organizing this excellent week of very insightful discussions in preparation for the Lisbon conference and then later on the Summit of the Future. And we're very excited to conclude this very important series of conversations with a focused conversation on the perspective of the youth, and then later on, as Hugo said, on civil society. So to do that, today I'm joined by a very impressive lineup of panelists, colleagues joining from all over the world and providing different perspectives and insights on this topic. And I would like to just say one word from my side as the moderator and the incoming chair of the Space Generation Advisory Council, is that when we think really about the management and sustainability of outer space activities, the word sustainability, at least to me, really means thinking in an intergenerational perspective. Sustainability means being able to hand over the world that we have received in at least the same fashion, or hopefully in a better fashion, to those that will come after us. And therefore, we see at SGAC the topic of sustainability really intertwined with the involvement of the youth, because there cannot be an effective and fair sustainability without the involvement of the voice of those that will inherit the world of today. But we also see sustainability intertwined with the idea of future generations. And so future generations are those that will inherit the world of the future, and the people that we owe the responsibility to build a better outer space environment in this case. And looking at the structure of the Summit of the Future, as you know, there are 5 chapters, and 2 of them are dedicated to youth and future generations. Chapter 4 of the Pact for the Future, and Chapter 5 is dedicated to the transformation of global governance, including on outer space. And we believe at SGC that this panel actually embodies the connection between these 3 very important topics. Each of them is the subject of a specific policy brief from the United Nations Secretary General. So space, youth, and future generation binded together by the concept of intergenerational sustainability. This will be the red thread of our discussion today, and we hope it could also be the red thread of conversations happening around space, youth, and future generations around the Lisbon conference, and then later on at the Summit of the Future. Now, without further ado, I would like to introduce briefly my panelists and then give them the floor for a few opening remarks. We would like to keep this session as interactive as possible, so there will be brief presentations from each of them, and then we will go into a discussion of the key topics related to this argument. But we will also invite questions from the audience. So those of you following us on YouTube, and thank you again for joining us, please take a moment to reflect on a question that you have and then put it in the chat, and it will be forwarded to us, and we will hopefully have some time to discuss it. We're going to be together for around an hour, maximum an hour and a half of your time, and we're very excited to make the most of it. So first, I'm joined by a colleague from the Space Generation Advisory Council and a dear friend, Ms. Giuliana Rotola, who's a PhD student in climate change and space law at Sant'Anna School of Advanced Studies. And she's one of the 2 coordinators of the Space Generation Advocacy and Policy Platform within SGC. The other coordinator is Gino Petrovici, that is also joining us today as rapporteur for this wonderful session. I also have the pleasure to be joined by Joan Chesoni, who is an experienced senior legal practitioner in the field of space law, director on the Kenyan Space Agency board, mentor of the UNOOSA Space for Women program, and alumnus of both the Leiden University and International Space University, where she also serves as alumni representative. Afterwards, we will join also by Charles Nzeussi, who leads SAS, Pivotal Space Sustainability, Climate Action, and Life Cycle Assessment Project, driving the company to the forefront of global space sustainability. Also an alumnus of ISU, as I am, and I think as Giuliana as well, and Regional Partnership Manager for Africa at SGAC. We also have the great pleasure of being joined by Dr. Merve, who is a postdoctoral researcher at the Faculty of Law, University of Neuchâtel, sorry for my pronunciation, as well as co-founder of the Swiss Space Law Forum. She holds a master's degree and a doctorate in public law with a focus on international law from Ankara University and Graduate School of the Social Science. And last but not least, we are joined by Marianne Rochling, who is a physics student at the Technical University of Vienna, president of the TU Wien space team, and co-founder of the Austrian Network of Women in Aerospace Europe. So as you can see, we have a very diverse set of panelists, each of them bringing different perspectives from the work of youth-led organizations like SGAC, the perspective of an emerging space country such as Kenya, from Joan, the work of a company at the forefront of space sustainability like SAS, and then a legal perspective from Dr. Berger, and then a technical perspective from Marianne Rochling. And so I think without further ado, I would like to give the floor to each of them in order for some brief opening remarks, setting the scene, let's say, for our discussion, and then we'll go into discussing some topics. And I would like to begin with Giuliana, who I believe will talk to us about an intergenerational pact for space sustainability. Julie, the floor is yours. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you very much, Antonino, for the introduction and for having us today. So, as you mentioned, I'm here representing the Space Generation Advocacy and Policy Platform. It's called SGPP. So, since 2021, we realized that SGC needed a platform to unify and harmonize the voices of our over 28,000 members all over the globe. So we have started creating some documents that were developing our united policy position every year. We have worked on lunar governance, on climate action, and then at the start of this year, we adopted an official policy position on space sustainability. The idea was to create a sustainability pact between different generations and between different stakeholders, a pact that would really foster the synergy between all of space stakeholders and also raise awareness on the necessity of achieving space sustainability. And so this is why we created this IPAST report, so a report that is promoting this intergenerational pact for space sustainability. So our team started by interviewing a diverse range of stakeholders in the space arena, and also distributed a survey to all of GCA members to understand what were the most pressing issues for younger generations on space sustainability. The objective was to establish a collaborative and more inclusive global space community that really was able to uphold principle of sustainability, equity, and intergenerational equity and shared responsibility. And we also wanted to create a future generation that is knowledgeable, but also engaged and capable of advancing space exploration and stewardship. And we wanted to promote the necessity for creating fora that can effectively voice the concern of younger generations within the space community. To achieve these objectives, we agreed that this intergenerational pact for space sustainability should address some priorities area. The first one is the multilateral governance of space issues, inclusivity and youth participation in space. So we want this pact to promote an active participation in a very globally inclusive space governance frameworks. Also that can also be developed through an increased multi-stakeholder participation. And we also believe that the pact should promote the adoption of dedicated institutional measures to ensure the meaningful participations of representatives from recognized youth organizations within the UN system, but also beyond the UN system. The second priority area is international collaboration and cooperation in the exploration and use of space. So an intergenerational pact should promote the development of dedicated tools for enhancing information sharing and transparency, and also promote capacity building in space law and policy to ensure that emerging nations can actively participate in the development of key rules for the sustainable use of space. The third priority area is space traffic management, with a particular focus on dark and quiet skies. So we believe on the importance of regularly exchange and use lesson learned on the way towards adopting and enforcing shared standards and best practices. And also we believe on the importance of developing and implementing measures to reduce light pollution and radio frequency interference. Then the fourth area of our pact, our idea of pact, would be including, of course, a section on space debris, so developing norms, fixing milestones, and supporting technologies for the incremental removal of space debris. Then take all of the steps towards ensuring that all of the space activities are conducted keeping in mind the protection of the space environment, and then ensuring swift implementation of soft law instruments such as the LTS guidelines and space debris mitigation guidelines. And then finally, we have the fifth area. So, of course, space sustainability goes also beyond Earth orbit. So we believe that this intergenerational pact should also include some consideration of sustainability beyond Earth orbit. So ensuring that all of the activities conducted on celestial bodies or in general beyond orbit are regularly evaluating the impact on the outer space environment and are including all of the appropriate measures for mitigations of these impacts. We believe that it is important for future activities and for future signatories of the pact to commit to always limit in time and in size all territorial-based uses of the moon and other celestial bodies, and also maybe developing an evolving list of sites and resources that are internationally considered scarce, and then stakeholders should pledge to use and extract space resources with due regard to the interests of all countries, with particular regards to the need of developing countries. So these are our 5 priority areas, and then we have also identified three pathways, potential avenues to achieve the pact's objectives. So creating binding agreements, promoting technological advancement, and global education and advocacy programs. We created this pact because this idea of a pact because we believe that it's time for also of space stakeholders to come together and agree on this intergenerational pact and contribute to a more just, inclusive and sustainable future in space. So I think I'm very excited for the conversation that we will have soon, and I want to close here to give time also for the introduction of the other panelists, and thank you very much.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Julie. And, you know, as chair of SGC, I'm so proud to see all the work that the SGPP has done to really bring together the voice of the youth and then advocate it with such effectiveness. So thank you so much to you and Gina and all the members of the IPAS team that worked hard to develop a policy position like that, which you can find online on the website of SGC. And now let's dive a little bit more into a complementary perspective, I would say, to the one of the youth, which is the perspective of an emerging spacefaring nation. And so I am pleased to give the floor now to Joan Chesoni, another good friend and colleague from Leiden University, who will talk to us about the importance of finding a common understanding among emerging and emerged spacefaring nations for really achieving intergenerational space sustainability. Joan, thank you so much for joining us. It's a pleasure to have you today, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Antonino, and a really big pleasure to be here and be part of this forum and panel. And I think just coming in from what Giuliana talked about, especially I'm very keen about intergenerational impact, and it is usually a really big conversation, at least from our culture here in Africa, having an intergenerational impact and giving forth to the next generation is really a conversation that we have generally from childhood. So it's very, I think this is a pivotal moment in terms of space governance globally, and it's the right time that this conversation should then link to what would be our intergenerational impact for those who will come after us. And now, I think when I was preparing for this, I decided to look at what our experience has been as Kenya, and how a common understanding has been something that has consistently emerged, a common understanding, in terms of what would constitute a space governance framework globally that would benefit, would be mutually beneficial, would create symbiotic relationships between established spacefaring nations and emerging spacefaring nations, has been something that has played itself over and over again during the different stages of development. So very briefly, Kenya has had activities relating to space for almost 60 years now, although not from a perspective that the actual nation of Kenya was actively involved. We've had a long relationship with the Italian government and had the Italian Space Agency actually setting up an offshore launch platform in the 1960s, and also a ground station. The platform, of course, is no longer operational, but the ground segment is still very much operational and is known as the Luigi Broglio Malindi Space Center. So this is run concurrently and jointly by the Kenyan government and the Italian government. So we have had presence of space activities on our land as Kenya for, as I said, almost 60 years, but only then looked to actually setting up the space agency a few years ago. So that began in the year 2017. In terms of what we saw, and I would like to give the story of how we started off. We participated in as Kenya participated in the inaugural phase of the competition that was organized by UNOOSA and JAXA, which was to help students in emerging spacefaring nations acquire knowledge on how to build satellites. And Kenya emerged as the winner in the first phase of this particular competition. And believe it or not, from the work the students did, and this is for me really the next generation, it was so impressive that that impacted the decision that the Kenya government made to make the Kenya Space Agency an organization, because previously space activities were run under the military, under the auspices of a space secretariat. So from this particular engagement, the building of this satellite, we then had the space agency being established. Once the space agency was established, I was appointed as the representative of the Attorney General, and I still remain I always make this joke, I remain the youngest member of that board by a wide margin, some decades. So really, when you look at the intergenerational play, it's really there on my board. I am the youngest member, and we have members who are very experienced in life and professionally on the board. So there is, for me, already a day-to-day play on what it means to have those who have gone before you professionally, mentoring and building systems that will actually benefit the future generations. Now, how do we then transpose this to a level where we are talking about having, on a global perspective, established spacefaring nations actually can use the same model in terms of helping emerging spacefaring nations not reinvent the wheel, borrowing on best practices, establishing systems that are sustainable for the future. Because guess what? The established spacefaring nations already went through a system where they had the opportunity to experiment, the opportunity to build systems. So with time and with practice, we've been able to establish what works and what doesn't work very well. And so for the emerging spacefaring nations, why not borrow on the best practices, borrow on the systems that actually work, and borrow the systems that will build a sustainable future for the space economy. So on this note, I believe that cooperation is key, openness as far as possible. Obviously, as states on the earth, we have different interests, we have different levels of development, but I really believe that if we can actually meet at a table where the rules are clear, where the rules are something that we've all generated together, then we should be able to actually gain benefit according to what each nation needs. Now, I know it might sound like a very utopian model, but I believe conversations have to start somewhere. And if we start the work now, then perhaps we can build something that's, say works for me as Kenya, works for Portugal, works for, according to what my needs are, according to what my circumstances are. So essentially, those are my thoughts around a common understanding. And this is about conversations. I mean, already as we have Corpus moving along on a consensus model, I know perhaps maybe conversations have been a bit slow for the past 60 years or so, but I think it's time we revive this. So thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Joan. And again, the story that you just told is so inspiring, from one thing that leads to another, and the role of the youth. And, the reason why SGC, for example, was created was really to channel and enable the vigor and creativity of the youth. And I think your story tells that beautifully. And as for your inspiration for cooperation, I think, we have seen space remaining a sort of sanctuary above many other conflicts on Earth. This has been threatened recently, to be very open and frank. But I think with actually the mindset and perspective of the young generation, and please keep high the fly of young people in the Kenyan board of the space agency, I think we can have a different approach, and I think we can lay the foundations to build a better futures. But to do that, we actually need rules. And as you all know, space law is there to ensure that space remains peaceful and hopefully becomes more sustainable and remains safe for all countries. And so I think who better than Dr. Merve Erdem to talk to us about it briefly, about the role of space law also in the intergenerational governance of space. Dr. Erdem-Burger, thank you so much for joining us, and we're looking forward to hearing from you.
Thank you very much for the invitation. First of all, I would love to congratulate SGAC for their excellent report. And I want to talk about very little today's challenges, and since the beginning of the week that we have been talking about is definitely creating intergenerational inequity. That means that our level of today's space activities might negatively affect the future generations' access to outer space. And the role of outer space is, of course, outer space law, of course, ensuring intergenerational equity. But how can we do it has to be an open question right now, and has to be answered, because outer space law, as Antonino, also Joanna, also know very well. It's from 1960s and only developed through soft law, non-binding guidelines, and it doesn't really give us much a hint on how we can transform intergenerational equity principle of environmental law or sustainable development to outer space law. I am trying to just open questions here, can we do this transformation to ensure intergenerational equity through progressive interpretation of Article 1, for instance, freedom of use and utilization, exploration, but benefits for all countries and everyone, or again, progressive interpretation of due regard principle or harmful contamination would help us to transform this principle into space law, or we can use Article 3 to go to international law, general principles of international law, and take those principles to help us to ensure this equity. It's again open question we can discuss, but this is definitely for sure that we need more protection and entrance, and bring international intergenerational equity discourse to other space law. And how we can do it, it's a governance question. And maybe during the course of panel, we can further discuss how we can do this. Thank you very much.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Dr. Erdenburger. And I think the idea of an evolutionary interpretation that has been recently, not recently now, but since a few, probably decades now, proposed by the International Court of Justice would be very interesting to apply to space law, especially because, as you rightly said, the Outer Space Treaty was designed to be foundational, and it is a treaty on principles, and principles are sufficiently generic to be evolved and interpreted according to the needs of time. And so I think that's going to be a very important exercise, and I'm looking forward to hearing more about it during the discussion today. So thank you very much. And now let's go to a complementary perspective, which is the role of the industry. And I would like to go to a fellow SGAC member, Charles Nzeussi from SES, who will talk to us about the contributions of the space industry, and in particular, obviously, the work that they're doing at SES in the quest for intergenerational sustainability and the importance of environmental and social governance discussions towards this very important goals. Charles, thank you so much for joining us. Welcome, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Dr. Antonino. And I hope you can hear me clearly, so perfect. So because it's the first time I'm talking, I want to first express my gratitude to the Portuguese Space Agency and UNOOSA for the invitation to this very important and super interesting policy symposium. So SES is really happy to contribute to this discussion, and also to, of course, like space sustainability topics and initiatives. Maybe a little bit before I start, I want to give some quick background about SES, just for everyone to understand when we will be talking about what we are doing at SES. So SES is a leading European and global satellite operator headquartered in Luxembourg, which provide services through Europe, but also the rest of the world. So we operate an extensive fleet of about 50 GSO satellite, both in EU and non-EU. And that expand also to the O3b power system that is in MEO orbit, and it was the very first commercial Ka band non-GSO satellite system, I will say. So that was to just set the scene. Now, from an ESG perspective, and for everyone, ESG stands for environmental, social, and corporate governance. Back in 2021, we did a very comprehensive work drafting our ESG strategy. That falls under 4 key pillars. The very first one is sustainable space. Then we have climate action, diversity and inclusion, and the last one, critical human needs. I will not go through those pillars because it can be extensive. I will just talk from an intergenerational perspective, what we are doing at SES. Let's say that is definitely built across on the cooperation or collaboration across different departments. And maybe before I go into that, just while preparing this discussion, I had, for example, to work with my director and to also discuss and work and share knowledge with VPs and senior VPs, etc. That is one quick example of how we work as an with this intergenerational approach. But that also means, as I said before, a collaboration across different departments, and the ESG department work, for example, with the legal and regulatory team when it's come to new laws that are coming. For example, we have the EU space law, where we had to contribute on several topics from space sustainability, safety and security, the work they are doing for ITU with the WRC, or maybe registration of several asset, and etc. I can take another example example, with procurement, where we work on supply chain sustainability, or how to approach our Scope 3 greenhouse gases emissions. It is the same with the technology team, where we are working with them on the space sustainability rating that is touching into several layers of space sustainability. Same for reusable launcher, space situational awareness, and life cycle assessment. I will come back on the life cycle assessment rather very quickly at the end, but again, we can expand these examples with several other departments, like the facility management, where we work on environmental management system, renewable energy, end of life of our product, etc., etc. So this means working with several departments, several offices across the world, and several cross, I will say, generational approaches of addressing all those sustainable topics. So in short, just to finalize this part, managing space sustainability involves definitely the contribution of different stakeholders, including all the employees and the customer, to integrate their priorities while defining some impactful strategies and actions. This also means working or aligning with international guidelines, as SES has to align also with UNOOSA's guidelines, for example, to tackle or to tap into the sustainable principle, but also a regional framework at EU level or national one everywhere where we are operating. I said I will come back quickly on the life cycle assessment because we just finalized one of the life cycle assessment on one of our satellites. And in short, the life cycle assessment bring a unique quantified approach of addressing space sustainability across various segments, like the launch segment, the space segment, and when we talk about space segment, it is in-orbit segment, but also the manufacturing of the satellite and the ground segment, including the user's equipment. And that is something that is not always, that is very unique in the industry. And I planned initially to go through some of the hotspots by segment, but I'm afraid it can be long. I will just say that it is difficult to quantify some of the impact of the space industry nowadays. And that means first looking into the overall life cycle of the product, from the manufacturing part, where you have to consider the clean room, all the processes, all the part of the satellite that need to be shipped from one part of the world to another one. The launch, where you will have the launch event, the propellant, the first and second stage of the launcher. You will have the ground equipment where you have the gateways, the data center, etc., etc. And same for the user part, where you will have several hotspots from the manufacturing of the antenna of the user or the modem, as well as the use phase. In short, to be really solution oriented, and I really enjoy when Joan mentioned that building on best practices, it is important to be able first to understand where the hotspots are regarding your own operations, whether it is on Earth or in space, what can be done, and partnership is definitely part of the solution. Lesson learned from past experience also is critical, and it is also important to look into public partnership approach, to have not only the viewpoint or the approach of like policy makers, but also have the input, the contribution, and the feedback of like satellite operator, let's say the industry, actors, as well as other players from academia, from NGOs, and that is definitely, I think, a critical element to highlight. So yeah, I will pause here, but I'm happy to elaborate on any of the points I mentioned.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Charles, and I think the role of the industry here is it's key, and the role of a young force within the workforce within the industry it's even more, given the fact that, as you said, even in one company, in order to have a proper plan for environmental and social governance, you need to discuss across different departments, and the more I think young people you have within those departments, I would say the better the outcome will be, because the more investment you have towards the future and the ensuring of sustainability in the future. And that's a perfect segue for the last presentation of today before our panel discussion from Marianne Rochling, who will talk us about really the development of the future workforce. So engineers in the making, as we can say here, and how we bring them to the table of this discussion by bringing them first to companies and then keeping them informed and included in the discussion. So Marianne, it's a pleasure to have you with us. Nice t-shirt, by the way, and we look forward to hearing from you. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. We even have nicer socks, but I won't show them now. I think that's the wrong setting for that. Warm greetings from Austria. Thank you very much for having me here. I'm the president of the TU Wien Space Team since January now, and we are an association with approximately 100 students or more that are working in their free time, actually self-organized on space projects. And specifically, we have currently 3 bigger projects, one building a rocket engine by liquid for the Euroc, actually, where we will be in Portugal then. And we also build one satellite, a CubeSat, that will hopefully launch at the end of the year, where we are working actually together with high schoolers on small projects they will then do on our satellite once it's in orbit. And the whole prospect of the thing is to bring them the importance of space closer, as well as Earth observation missions. And our third big project is actually building a hydrogen-powered airplane. And then we have a few smaller projects as well, one being where we developed our own classes in Rocketry 101, if you want to say that, because at TU Wien we don't have actually an aerospace engineering branch, so we do that ourselves. And we have also a project where we also work together with high schoolers or middle schoolers, where we launch a small, I don't know if you know the candidate competition by the European Space Agency, but we are the launch provider of that and also judges of that. And this will actually happen in 2 weeks, so I'm very excited for those teams. Yes, exactly. And so one could say we are in contact with lots of people my age, I'm 23, at the very beginning of their career, not even at the beginning, like even before that, while they're still studying. And we're also very well connected in Europe, at least, so I know there are a lot of people. And also we are providing already for the next generation to come into this aerospace sector, to already show them what they can do with technical skills, what they can do in such an exciting field as aerospace is. And yes, and I think it's very important to bring exactly these people to the table, even 15-year-olds, because from 15 to 30, I would say, this class where I'm operating in, they're so creative and they're so wonderful with so many ideas and so much to do still, and so excited to do all that. I mean, just one evening at the space team with like 10 people around eating pizzas, and there are things that can happen there. It's just incredible. And also, I would say, since we are not yet in the day-to-day life of a workforce and with all the issues that come with adulthood, quite free still in the mind and quite free in thinking of all those things. Yes. And I personally really think that it's very important to have like a very diverse background from technical. For example, I'm studying physics, but especially in the space team, we have like from each study background somebody. We even have law students. We need those as well. So like not only technical, but just everything is very mixed up. And in every discussions, as for example in here, I find it very important that we have a diverse background and that we bring also women to the table. And I mean, we were talking about a lot later about threats and future things, but a few things I would like to highlight out. My generation, or the people I work with, they really think about not only what happens in space, but also like in general life right now. Because of course, I don't know how it's in the other countries, but at least in Europe, everything is getting way more expensive and expensive. It's hard to only study. A lot of people I know also have jobs next to it. So not only studying, but they need already to provide for themselves. And I think it's very hard that when you're 18 and decide if you now study or start to work right away, you're like kind of, you want to live. And without studying, you don't have lots of opportunities in space, actually. So like already there happens a lot of decision points. But that's also like more a general point of view, what a threat for people is right now. And another thing is, at least again in Europe, I have a feeling that space losing relevance is also kind of an issue, because if you ask people on the street what is space for, they don't really know the answer. And also I think like if you tell them what you're doing, that you're in a space team, you're building rockets, they ask like, why would you do that? What is the necessity? So I think it's not quite communicated to just the general public what the relevance of space is for us. And the third thing is also like, aren't you harming more the environment that you're actually helping with the space missions to have? So I think there's a lot of communication still necessary, at least here in Austria. And yes, so this is like I think a good starting point to think about communication again. I know, but yeah, I think that's also my end. I wanted to make it quite quick that we have more time for discussion later. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Marianne. And I would say it's extremely important, the work that you're doing. So thank you so much, because really starting from the high school, and I dare say even middle school, is where, you know, we can instill the ideas and the importance and passion of space in bright young minds that we desperately need to then come to the table and contribute to the sector. I remember the first time I was exposed to space was when I was 8. My father gifted me a telescope, and I started looking at the moon, and I still do that with the very same telescope. And, you know, that is one of my first memories about space, and something that inspired me all the way long. So thank you for your work, and thank you also for bringing a little bit of, you know, down to earth realism on our discussion, because it is true that, you know, the general public is a little bit a stranger to the conversation that we're having here, right? They don't really understand anymore the relevance of space. There are so many reasons for conflict on Earth, and we are not great at communicating the benefits of space. And I think that's one of the key areas that we have to improve and show them that we are supporting the Sustainable Development Goals. And if we don't care for a sustainable space, we're going to lose the opportunity to have a sustainable Earth. And I think these two topics were actually discussed extensively at the World Space Forum last December, where we were together for a very similar discussion. And with the government of Austria, we had also a side event to talk about it in SGAC in February, and it will be discussed beyond the Summit of the Future at the World Space Forum in Bonn that the German Space Agency is organizing. And we're very happy to, again, continue engaging on these topics. Now, after we have this wonderful, I would say, mix of perspectives and contributions of, you know, engineers, lawyers, young people, emerging spacefaring nations, established companies, now let's try and have a discussion, I would say, among the key topics that I think are animating the discussion on space sustainability, and that we've seen already debated during the week. And I would like to start with, let's say, threats and solutions, which I think is what we really need to focus on here. And I would like to begin by inviting comments from the panelists on what do you think is the most concerning threat to the safe and sustainable uses of space for future generation? If you have to name one problem that you think is the problem that we have to focus on, what would it be? And I'd love to hear from all of you. So just feel free to, Julie, I think, was first, very quick. Go ahead.
Hi. So, yeah. I mean, there are many threats also. We have seen this week during all of the discussion what are the several issues related to space sustainability that we need to address. I believe that if we had to make, identify the first one, probably space debris is one of the most challenging threat. And it is because it transcends technological challenges. So it's, of course, a technological challenge, but it also we don't realize how space debris, often we don't realize how space debris, it's jeopardizing the safety of current activities, but is also affecting marginalized communities in a very disproportionate way. And if we think, for example, I was participating in a workshop a few months ago on space debris under a feminist perspective. So looking at how marginalized communities, women in particular, and women from countries from underserved regions are affected in a way that is really increased if compared to global north countries. So I think the technological divide, the environmental damage that space debris is creating, and also the inequality that is exacerbating made space debris one of the most pressing challenge for me. And I want to also leave the floor to the other panelists, but I think, yes, like space debris for me is the number one because it's technological, it's a governance issue, and is also an inequality issue. So it's like really, it has all of the problems.
One issue to rule them all. Thank you. Thanks very much, Julie. Merv, please go ahead.
Thank you very much. Yeah. I will refer to, again, intergenerational sustainability discourse. In general discourse, there is this strong sustainability camp, weak sustainability measures camps, and their claim for strong sustainability measures camp is the lack of knowledge for future. What is the effect? Like, we want to prevent, or we want to be sure for the sustainability, but we don't know what the future brings. So this is a strong criticism for intergenerational sustainability discourse. I would say space debris, again, also in line with this criticism. Okay, maybe we don't know the effects of our today's action for the future very well, but for space debris, we know. Since 1978, we are talking about a Kessler syndrome. And we know how our space activities would be affected if we don't solve space debris measure. It is like, from the technical perspective as well, it is very clear. So there is no uncertainty on the effect of our number of launch activities, number of satellites being orbited to an Earth orbit, and they might create space debris and might create Kessler syndrome in the future. So my answer would be, again, space debris.
Thank you, Merv. And I like what you said about the fact that we cannot ignore the consequences anymore. Maybe 50 years ago, it was not really clear, but today we know where we're going towards. And the fact that we're not taking action, I think it's an added responsibility that emphasizes the importance of space debris. And also, Julie, just to come back to your point, I really appreciate the insight coming from a feminist perspective, and the fact that really the problem of space debris increases inequality in the use of space because it's such a despair treatment, let's say, compared to, again, when we didn't know, or we claim that we didn't know, and we have done so much damage. And now the people that are coming after us, and especially marginalized communities, are literally left to collect the pieces and put them together. Joan, please. Sorry, I thought Marianne was first. Apologies.
I thought Charles was actually before me, but he kind of switched. So Charles, if you want to start before me, please do. But
okay, thanks so much. Yes, actually, thanks so much. I will just go ahead, but I will just emphasize on the previous panelist point of view that when we talk about threat, that also means not only sustainability, because it's also aligned. Sustainability and safety and security requirements are kind of really aligned here, and yes, definitely. The focus on space sustainability, let's say space debris is one of the key elements we need to focus on. It's just, I just prefer to not repeat exactly what was said. So first, the only one topic will be space debris, but there are several other topics that we can also at least keep in mind as important topics. And of course, climate change is one of them. But I also mentioned the life cycle assessment we made, we completed recently, and that also shows some additional potential issues when it comes to ozone depletion due to launchers' activities. And maybe the last concern that I can also maybe highlight is the unknown effect of like small satellite end of life kind of, because at the end of that life, during the re-entry, they are burning to the atmosphere, and there are some studies showing some potential concern there. But those are just topics to keep in mind. But again, the first topic or the only one will be space debris for now.
Thank you, Charles, and apologies for skipping your Microsoft Teams displaying tricks on me. Numbers change faster than I could possibly realize. So, but thank you so much. And I for example, never thought about the unintended consequences of burning satellites upon reentry. And that's something that we consider to be the best solution now, but maybe will create more problems in the future. So again, being aware of these consequences and study them, it's a key element. It's part of our responsibility towards future generations. Marianne, sorry.
Yeah, I mean, I obviously agree with my previous speakers. I just want to highlight a different thing. I think it's also very a big threat to not come on a common ground internationally. Because if every country does something else, or everyone is leaving to itself, and everybody else is saying, yeah, that's anyway, somebody's doing something, it won't help if Austria has, for example, just rules and regulations for space. I think it's really necessary that we are talking internationally and find internationally a common ground.
Absolutely. I mean, this is part of the problem, right? The fact that we don't want to be one country or two countries taking measures and then the others doing nothing. It's the same problem where with climate change, where there are a few responsible actors and then others that are just simply sitting there and ignoring the problem, or willingly decide not to do anything on a trade-off basis because of what is more convenient.
Doing just anything and lobbying it, and so on. So it's really important that we are all on one common ground in this case.
Absolutely. And I think this was the main topic that Joan brought in her opening remarks. Joan, I'm sure you'll agree with that. Please.
Thank you very much. I think I will comment about space debris a little bit at the end on a light note, but I have a very different contribution to give, something which I think is often missed in many rooms and is something I've noticed. And I think maybe Antonino knows this is usually my track of conversation in terms of you cannot have a conversation if you do not understand the language. So you need to speak the same language. And I think that also speaks to what Marianne was saying about having a unified approach. So for me, I think the biggest issue that I think is a threat is actually lack of information. And I think this is not only an issue that's limited to the global south, but as Marianne said, if you talk to somebody on the street in Austria and ask them about space, they are like, okay, well, how is this relevant to my day-to-day life? Now, in the global north, obviously, there's a lot more information available. It's accessible. Now, in the global south, it may be a bit of a challenge, and I'm just thinking about my experiences in working in government and working in the area where we're trying to set up a space economy for our country. And some of the questions I actually get from very respected and experienced colleagues show you the fact that we who are within the space circles are unable to effectively communicate the information that we need for people who are non-space to understand in order for us to achieve a system that works, a system that's sustainable. So for me, the big threat is education and communication. And I think if you all know Emma Gatti, Dr. Emma Gatti, she's always saying, nobody cares about your satellite. I mean, which translates to me that you need to be able to communicate in a manner that's effective and impactful, especially if you're within the space community, because the space community and the global space economy cannot grow, expand in a sustainable fashion if the non-space people have no idea. If it's rocket science to them, then I don't think that we're really going to achieve a proper governance framework or a sustainable global space economy. So those are my two issues. Then on the light note, in support of everybody, yes, space debris. Yesterday, when I was watching the launch of Starship, I noticed the trajectory moved really close to Kenya. The splashdown was intended for the Indian Ocean, I believe. So maybe most people don't know this, but Kenya straddles the equator. So we're an equatorial state. And so I'd say the impact of space debris has been mostly in countries that are at a lower latitude than we are and at a higher latitude. But yesterday, for the first time, it actually occurred to me that, you know, space debris could be a conversation very soon, because I noticed the trajectory of Starship was quite close to the equator. So this might become an issue for us as well pretty soon. And I think I agree with the comments with all the previous speakers as to the different impacts relating to space debris. Thank you.
Thanks, Joan. And I think you emphasize a very important point that I think also Merv touched upon at the beginning, which is like this lack of awareness about the problem and the lack of support from, you know, the general public, and the fact that we're not really thinking about that. It's a big issue. And you know, I am a huge fan of Emma's work in Space Watchdog Global, and the idea of breaking the space bubble. I think it's so important, right? Because we tend to have this conversation among ourselves, and that's why I think the Summit of the Future is really a key moment to do that, because it's not just space, it's space in the context of other many global important issues, perhaps much more important issues when you think about war, poverty, and you know, other very important issues about human rights. But we are there, and we have to show our connection with those topics. And I think UNOOSA is also doing a wonderful job in promoting that, in ensuring that the general public and the rest of the UN system is aware of the benefits and challenges of space related to the Sustainable Development Goals and to any issue that you can possibly imagine on Earth. And we have to do, again, as we said already before, a much better job at that. Now, I think space debris became very popularly the number one issue, and I think it's no surprise. But the question then becomes, what can we do, right, to address this issue? And in particular, I would say, looking ahead at this unique opportunity, as the Secretary General says, it's once in a lifetime opportunity of the Summit of the Future. What would you recommend? What kind of governance and technical solutions you think we should discuss at the Summit of the Future to address, let's say, beginning with the challenge of sustainability and space debris in particular? As we said, this is the number one threat. And then I think related to that also what was identified, this lack of information and awareness about the problem and about the benefits of space for the public. So if we have a magic wand and can write a sentence in the Pact of the Future about space debris and lack of information, what would you write? Marianne, yes.
Okay, this is a hard question to answer, and I can only make some suggestions from a technical point of view, but not sure if they're really like good for doing them. But I was so happy when SpaceX started to land their boosters, actually, because then you can firstly reuse them, and also secondly, the issue of dumping on Kenya, for example, gets just like smaller and smaller and smaller. And then when China launched their space station, and it was like all over the media here, yeah, there will be the rocket at that time, it might crash down somewhere on somebody. I was like, if we have the technical possibility to land rockets boosters already, then why not use it? For example, I think that would also already limit a lot of threats from space debris. It's like
great point. No, great point. And I remember when, you know, everybody knows now the story of Elon Musk and SpaceX, when he went for the first time to companies in the space sector and even to space agencies saying, we have to reuse the satellites. We cannot just let them crash back. They were laughing at him. They were like, oh, are you crazy? This is too expensive. It's too difficult. I think the point here, I was a few months ago, I was in November for the Paris Peace Forum, and I listened to a beautiful intervention and about solving the global issues and solving climate change and solving the problems. And this woman that intervened said, we are going to solve the problem. The question is at what cost, and who's going to pay for it in the meantime, right? It's a trade-off because... Idea, absolutely. No, what I'm saying is 20 years ago, there was not enough incentives to say we have to invest in reusability, spend the money, develop the technology. In that sense, Elon Musk was really a pioneer. Today, I think we see that, and I think every company that is responsible should aim for that, and every government that wants to be responsible should encourage those. So I think it's an excellent point that should probably be emphasized. And at SGC, we're engaging with the Pact of the Future, providing our recommendations. So if you allow me, I will steal that suggestion and include it in our next iteration of comments.
Or do, or you can quote me or something.
100%, 100%. Charles?
Yeah, thanks so much. I mean, similarly, I don't really have the answer to the question, though, because it is a challenging one. But I will just build on what you said, that is, in short, I think it's good to prioritize a synergy of actions among, or we say between all the stakeholders, and take advantage also of existing capabilities. And you mentioned like all the potential behind reusable launcher, etc. So taking advantage of all those existing capabilities and expertise on various domains is definitely part of the solution, and also addressing or maybe using all the most comprehensive and global guidelines that exist already in set of procedure at national or regional or international level is important. So at the end of the day, I think we can definitely build on the role that ITU is playing to enable member states when it's come to the use of orbit and spectrum resources. UNOOSA has a key role to play also, and as they has been doing on establishing clear framework for space activities, and several other stakeholders, right? So like the Interagency for Space Debris Coordination Committee and several others. I don't think one single, I don't know if one single entity may have like the answer for that, but I think it's always good to have a synergy of actions at the end of the day.
100%. I think the idea of a global coordination for space debris mitigation and remediation was at the center also of what the Secretary General recommended in the policy brief. So that's a very good point, and something that is not so easy to foster. It should be automatic, but it is not, and so we have to work much harder to that. Merve.
Yeah, as a like policy brief, I would definitely, as already stated, like the highlight, as also included in the long-term sustainability guidelines, implementation of space debris mitigation measures are really, really important. And I am in my research, I'm looking at national space measures on space debris mitigation. It's quite fragmented, and like there are 81 states which are affiliated with a like satellite on the online index of UNOOSA, for instance, but only like 26 of them has like some standards or some legislations, or some of them only fully adhered or stated that they support the guidelines, but the implementation rate among the nations who sent satellites or whose non-governmental entity sent a satellite to outer space is very low. So we should definitely encourage the implementation of space debris mitigation guidelines. Maybe we should talk about the like how we can ensure or provide binding nature for such a system, and how we can also improve that system, because mitigation is just mitigation, like decrease the number of debris creation, maybe not enough with respect to, again, number of activities we are conducted. Maybe we can to improve it for further, we can start to discuss how we can balance freedom of outer space and our international organizations, and how we can, of course, again, regulate the legality of advanced or progressive technological interventions in outer space environment. So we also improve these mitigation guidelines. Thanks a lot.
No, wonderful point. And I think it's so important here that we, first of all, adhere to what we have. I think the Pact of the Future begins by saying we reaffirm our commitments. And sometimes we take that for granted. But if we don't really follow what we already have developed, then how can we really agree to new things? So that is so important. It's very sad to see that the rate of implementation is low. Do you remember the percentage? By any chance?
I don't remember the percentage, but I can give you some names. For instance, in this kind of research, we have seen legislations from, of course, spacefaring countries like USA, UK, France, Russia, China, but China's measures a little bit like administrative level. We see Cyprus, Belgium, Canada, like 20 countries here. I can count it again, like 20 countries have legislations among 81 states. But of course, this number is still important because I also calculated United States, Russia, and China, all of three itself has the 80% of the satellite listed on that index. So it is important that they have measures. But of course, we have to invite more people, more countries. And there are also countries like, I'm sorry, I'm taking a long time, but I want to show it. Like, it's really interesting. Algeria, India, Mexico, Poland, Czech Republic, Switzerland, these don't have any legislations, but at the UNOOSA, they state that we fully adhere, we fully support guidelines and standards. So without any legislation, they can also kind of see this mitigation guidelines as a form of law. So, of course, I'm discussing if this is becoming a customary international law. Maybe it is right now early to say. But yeah, there is some level of exception within at the international level and national level, but we need to increase it.
Do more. No, that's fascinating to hear. Thank you, Merve, also for the follow-up. And I would say, national legislation is one way to implement. Obviously, there are also other ways. What we care at the end is that the standards are complied, but the idea is also improving them. I think it's very important. Joan, please, thank you for waiting also.
Thank you very much. I think I just want to pick up on something that Merve has talked about, and I was actually going to bring that up and say, perhaps we could be walking a very long path towards the establishment of a legal framework through customary international law. But as we know, this takes time. But I also just wanted to say, perhaps a concern from a different perspective is that, as much as we look at the long-term sustainability guidelines and other soft law measures related to sustainability as soft law, it is to note that if a country chooses to incorporate these principles within its national law, then automatically, even at an international level, it becomes bound by that because it signifies acceptance on the part of that country. Even from a practice point of view, and for a non-lawyer, it would not make sense for you to have adopted a principle into your national law, but then at the international law level, you have a totally different perspective. So the fact that perhaps some of these nations then realize that they may feel fettered, especially for the emerging spacefaring nations, because some of these principles and guidelines, automatically actually require you to take measures that may, in certain aspects, be considered affected to technological research and development, if I can call it that. Yeah. So I think this is a concern that really needs perhaps to be considered and discussed further, so that we don't have a repeat of what has happened in other ecosystems. If you look at the energy sector, for instance, we have this drive towards green energy, but very little money going into actual research to support and development to support green energy development. For some countries, I'd say for Kenya, we were maybe accidentally fortunate because our energy portfolio, about 89% of our energy portfolio is green energy. It's solar, hydro, wind. And so we don't depend at a high significance on what would be considered the fossil fuels. But you see, for us, it was a policy decision, we took it. There are other countries on this continent, on Africa, which have the same resources but have not taken that approach and are instead have their economies run on fossil fuel models. So when you look at the push towards in that area towards, let's move towards green energy, but how much money are we putting into researching into green energy? So coming back to space, how much money are we putting into investing in sustainability? And yes, kudos to SpaceX and Elon Musk for showing us that this is actually possible, on the first phase. But how much money are we, as the global space economy, putting into research and development towards sustainability? So I think that's really something we need to look at and ask ourselves very hard questions, both from the established spacefaring nations and the emerging ones, because as I said, the emerging spacefaring nations perhaps also want an opportunity to develop, and unfortunately some of this research and development may have adverse impacts on our space ecosystem, considering where we are at this point in time. But the argument would be, for the established spacefaring nations, you had the time to actually do these experiments. You had the time to actually put in the research and etc. And we need to go through the same process. So I think a middle ground needs to be reached in order for us to be able to really have a meaningful conversation around this area. Others, I think that as the global space community, the states will just keep skirting around the issue and then quietly hoping that this will take root as customary international law and be binding. But that could be 60 years from now, and we could then have no space ecosystem by then. Thank you.
Thank you, Joan. And I think you bring up two very valid points beyond everything else that everyone said. It's been such an interesting discussion, so thank you all so much, really. One is that we don't need just to forbid things or order countries to do things. Countries ordering maybe actors to do things, but we also need to support, right, and enable. I think the investment in research and development to do, for example, active debris removal, it's something that we need to take into account. It cannot just be a question of, okay, let's make debris removal binding, but if we don't have the technologies or if it's too expensive, no one will do it anyway. So I think this has to go hand in hand. And then the second aspect, it's about equality, right? That there is obviously a group of countries, a group of actors that had all the time in the world to perfect their techniques, and now we're asking everybody else to do that in a much shorter window time, and that's probably not very fair. It's the same issue we're facing in climate change, I think. That's why I think I'm also very curious to hear what Julie would like to suggest.
Yes, so I agree, of course, with everything that was said before me, and I just want to briefly add 2 points. One is more practical and one probably is more theoretical. So we have this opportunity of the Summit for the Future, and I think we should use it to develop, fixed milestones, fixed targets. We have seen how the Agenda 2030, the United Nations Agenda 2030, and the SDGs have supported the world moving towards specific objectives, specific targets. So each of the SDGs has specific targets that have been addressed or are being addressed by companies, by governments. So defining what are the targets, what are the areas in which we need to have action, and have a new space agenda 2050, for example, is something very important. So the practical part is identifying the targets that we want to reach by 2050, 2040, or something like that. And then on the more theoretical part, I think going back also to what we were saying at the start of the opportunity of the Summit for the Future for us to make sure we the general public, and we also space bubble, understand the connection between what we do, what are the problems that we are facing in space, and what are the problems that we are facing on Earth, because all of the issues like space debris, pollution in space, are just a replication of what we did on Earth. And so taking this opportunity to connect these issues, understand the problems that are behind this issue, and moving forward with coordinated solution is a good way of moving forward, I believe. And one of the main things that should be discussed at the Summit for the Future for me related to space is the consideration of what is our relationship within the environment, with the environment. So one of the problems with space sustainability is that in many national legislation, space is not even considered part of the terrestrial environment, and therefore we cannot even apply environmental legislations to space because we consider space as something else, something that is separate for us. So reconnecting what is happening in space to what is happening on Earth, reconnecting the physical spaces of Earth, the Moon, the low Earth orbit, to a global environment where we that we belong to, where we operate, and that we need to protect. It's something very important. So, like putting an emphasis on this shared stewardship that we have, I think it's something that will be very important moving forward. On Earth, we have seen indigenous communities all around the globe that have been really being able to bring these issues for the protection of the environment, of the biodiversity, of natural environments around the globe. And we should take that experience and bring it to space. We need to understand what is our shared responsibility, our shared stewardship of the environment, not only think about the safety of space operation, but really rethink the way in which we relate to the environment in which we are operating. And yeah, I think I just wanted to add these 2 points, but I think all of the comments before mine were very, very critical, very punctual, and very effective to how we want to move forward.
Perfect. Thank you, Julie. I love the idea of a shared stewardship, that it's something that probably we need to, impress more in our minds, and probably the Summit of the Future with its more like solemn commitment could be a great opportunity to do that. And the idea of the environment, it's a long-standing issue, and again, time that probably we solve it. Now, we only have 15 minutes in our discussion. Time flies when you have fun. But I want to go to one final question. And so maybe I'll ask all the panelists to be a little bit briefer in your remarks so that we have time to give the floor to everybody, and then close the session on time. Then we discuss about threat, we discuss about solutions, but one of the key focuses of this panel was the youth perspective. And I think we have shared here with fellow young people discussing, and I think that's been wonderful and quite refreshing from my viewpoint. But then when we think about developing these solutions, how can we ensure the meaningful participation of the youth in the development, but also, as we've been saying, in the implementation of these solutions? How we keep the young generation involved, how we bring them to the table of decisions, and how we bring them to the table of execution. Just to give an example, the ITU Secretary General recently established a youth advisory board. Something like that could be useful in your views. Should then UNOOSA and Corpus consider something similar? What would you recommend to make sure that we have young people at the table of decisions and in the execution of decisions? Yes, Charles.
Yeah, thank you so much. I think I'm super happy to jump there because just 1.5 months ago, thanks to SGAC also, I attended COPIOS, representing SGAC there as an observer. And I think SGAC is already doing a very great job at being on the table and sharing some key recommendations and expanding from that very good experience from SGAC. I will say NGOs and several other stakeholders are definitely a key element to contribute toward that. The last thing maybe I will say is for a company like us, for example, we mentioned ISU before, and they have that 3 I's approach, international, intercultural, and interdisciplinary way of addressing several topics. And on top of that, the intergenerational one is a key element that various stakeholders should consider in order to also have innovative idea, because the goal is not maybe to create one additional institution that will probably maybe add either a burden or solve some issues. I think the goal is to solve a problem, and what is the problem we are trying to solve here? That should lead to the solution, I think. And definitely, youth engagement and empowerment is part of the solution. And I think we just need to figure out also how to empower a little bit more youth, or we say the next generation, in order to play a key role toward solutions, the solutions we are trying to gather. So that's my contribution to the question.
Thank you, Charles, and it was a pleasure having you in Copus. And every time we have our delegation, it's great, because I think that's really why SGAC was created almost 25 years ago. By the way, we're going to turn 25 in July, so going to be some celebrations there. But yes, also the idea of empowering the next generation is probably the key element here. Marianne.
Thank you very much. I mean, next to SGAC, I think I can pinpoint several things one can do. First is invite people like me, and not necessarily me, because I won't be young forever, but like people like in my position and in this similar well-connected, I would say. Then support student projects, student associations, students-found initiatives anywhere, everywhere, because they exist. I know very many of them in all over Europe. So there are all those student initiatives, and if you connect to them, if you support them and invite them to events and network them, I think there you also get a lot out and a lot of the ideas out, and get an idea what they're thinking. And then the third thing is as well, connect those students thing again. For example, the European Rockety Challenge, it's such a good opportunity to just meet students from all over Europe. And then as well, companies or the Portugal Space Agency, who is also there. Like there you also get to know people, and there you also get, there's a big hub of students with similar ideas and also very different ideas and very creative minds. And I think those are good ideas to support.
Wonderful, thank you, Anna. I fully agree that we need to invite, support, and involve students. I think that's really one of the key elements, and that's why also we are very grateful for the Portugal Space Agency and UNOOSA for having us at this event and having this session. Yes, you want to add something?
Yes, I'm sorry. I forgot to say, you also need to make it accessible for those, because if young people contribute time next to studying, next to already working, to initiatives where they also contribute time and effort, you also need to make it accessible for them, to give them some kind of benefit for that. But that just was another additional point, because otherwise you just take time for them that they can't use for studying or something.
That is true. It has to be accessible, otherwise it will not work. Merve.
Thanks a lot. Yeah, I will also state 2 points: raising awareness between the students, especially I can talk about law students, because most of the time from my experience, I can say from Turkey and Switzerland, law students even do not know about the existence of space law and what is it for, why it is necessary, its relation with international law and domestic law. And in my capacity, we always tried and still trying to do is like there are space activities, there are challenges, which has also like legal discussions behind it, and we have to be like aware of it, and we have to discuss, and we have to find solutions to it. And to be able to do it, we established this non-governmental initiative, and I'm trying to give like courses to teach space law both in Switzerland and Turkey, raising awareness with my individual capacity. For institutional capacity, yeah, you guys are doing great job. SGAC as a like observatory with an observatory status at UNOOSA, it is very important, but accessibility, as Marianne stated, it's very limited. When it comes to the decision making, it is, yeah, for us, it is accessible, these forums, this type of forums, or any other conferences organized with the support of UNOOSA. But when it comes to the, for instance, legal subcommittee meetings, it's not easy to go and discuss and participate in the discussion. You have to be affiliated with a member state or with an observatory organization. Otherwise, you're not allowed. So maybe Again, for the accessibility, there should be other solutions like advisory boards or like network groups and their participation in decision-making procedures. UNOOSA would be nice to think about. Thanks a lot.
No, thank you so much, Mervyn. I think you bring an excellent point that, even space law education is not so well known. I mean, I myself had no idea about space law when I was studying law in Italy because there was no such reference to it. I discovered it literally by chance because I was watching a presentation by Elon Musk about going to Mars, and I said there must be some regulation about this project, and I Googled, Mars settlement law, and then I discovered about the outer space treaty, and that was totally random. So I think we have to do much more. And also what you said about COPUOS is so important as well, because everything that happens in COPUOS, it's either through a member state or a permanent observer. But again, we need a way maybe to make it more accessible for students. And when we did the event with UNOOSA in Austria in February, for example, the UNOOSA director, Arti Olamaini, had the idea of a model UN COPUOS where we can bring students to simulate a COPUOS discussion, wearing the shoes, let's say, of their own delegations, and then ideally having them staying for the session so that they can witness it firsthand. So something like that perhaps could be interesting, and we are very much looking forward to continuing discussing with UNOOSA about it. And thank you also all for your kind words about SGC. I think we have Julie next.
Yes, so I think the previous points were very important that were mentioned. So education and awareness is very important. Competitions, challenges are very important. So, for example, SGC is organizing every year in Italy now a startup competition. So putting an emphasis on the topic of the competition, like space sustainability, developing technological solution for space debris, is a way of involving younger generations and moving forward the agenda for space sustainability. We discussed a lot about also opportunities and accessibility, and I think something that I want to add, I'm sorry, but I have to do it, is the fact that internship or fellowship should be paid. It's a general problem for the UN. No, like I have to say that all of the internship within the UN system are unpaid. So how do you actually make an internship accessible to students all over the world if these internships are not paid? So that is a very, very critical issue that will need to be solved sooner or later. And then going to your point of the new ITU advisory board, if we want to really have a meaningful, effective involvement of younger generations, the idea of having youth advisory panels in the UN body or specialized agency is very important. What I like of the ITU new board is that I think they created a board with one representative from each region, and so it's a good way of having representation from all over the world. I think the same is happening, if I'm not wrong, with the Youth Advisory Board for Climate for the UN. So establishing these advisory panels or council for younger generations is very important within each of the bodies of the UN. And it's very important to connect these bodies, because the ITU advisory board should be talking to the climate change advisory board of the UN, to the space, to the UNOOSA advisory board. So creating these advisory boards and making sure that they are connected, not like the existing UN bodies that are a little bit working in silos. We should stop working in silos and we should connect these amazing young minds. And this is,
I love it. Connecting young minds and make these bodies inclusive. I think it's also so important. Johan, please, and then maybe we'll have a hot pursuit from Charles, but very quick after.
Yeah, I see we only have about 3 minutes to go. So my 1 minute. Look, I happen to, as I said, I joined our space agency board when I was in my early 30s. And one thing that really helped me was the fact that I really tried to look for appropriate mentors or people within the government that would be able to influence the conversation on space and involvement of younger people, women in space. So this is my challenge to SGSC, because I think SGSC has done a beautiful job globally, including here in Kenya. I want to say that one of the people that I recommended and helped do SSP, I think last year, was actually a very active SGAC member here in Kenya. So I want to say just, yes, it's true that for the youth to be involved at the level of corpus, it has to be through their state. But how do we get there? Maybe we need to start internally. And I hope all those watching this particular forum can be able to start to think about those kinds of solutions, because we need to approach our own governments and we need to make sure that we are actually on the table as the youth. I think maybe we start from inside as opposed to trying a solution from the external perspective first. Thank you.
No, absolutely. Bottom down and top down are both of them. They're very important. And I think the idea of this national and multilateral parallel solutions, or inclusive and connected solution, it's key. And also again in the policy brief is emphasized. Thank you so much, Joan. Charles, 20 seconds of pursuit, because we have to close in about 1 minute.
Perfect. So my 20 seconds, I want to say, first, we are all part of the solution, and that means making all those topics less abstract required the companies or private sector to showcase the solution that exists, or the problem they have, or the potential ways of implementing young generation ideas. And for us, we do that through professional visit where students can come into the company and see exactly what all those topics means, as well as internship, etc. So considering the contribution of private actors within all the technical and legal and policy discussions is definitely critical. Thank you so much.
Excellent, wonderful. And I think we are wrapping up to a close. It was a very, very interesting hour and a half of discussion. So thank you all to the panelists for your wonderful interventions. I enjoyed the discussion very much. I think we came up with some very good ideas that we will wrap up in the report, also with the support of Gina, and pass to the Portugal Space Agency, UNOOSA, in view of the Lisbon conference. I think here the message is very clear. Sustainability is one of the most important challenges of today, and the youth has to be at the forefront of discussing it. And I think the youth wants to be at the forefront and can provide insightful contributions and unique perspectives that have to be taken into account. So I think we're very delighted to be here. Again, thank you to the Portugal Space Agency, UNOOSA, for providing this space for the youth to discuss and considering our viewpoint. I think we have a lot of work to do, but we are very well settled in order to do it properly. And I would like to pass it on to Hugo now for closing this session. And thanks all of you again also for watching, and give you the appointment hopefully in Lisbon and then at the Summit of the Future for continuing this discussion. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Antonino. Thank you very much to all panelists. It was a great session today. I think we have a really good content that will support the conference then later on in May. So thank you to all of you, the panelists. Thank you very much, Antonino, for a well-conducted session. And to all, I will just continue in about half an hour with the civil society organization session. So let's pause now for 30 minutes and we'll be back in about 30 minutes. Thank you very much to all, and see you soon.